Hello friends, my name is Wilson.
I'm Cass.
Raising capital is one of the hardest things to do when building a startup. So today we're going to be answering some questions on what to focus on when building your pitch deck. And we're also going to be sharing some lessons that we've learned through the last few years pitching to hundreds of VCs. So without further ado, let's dive right in.
All right, how many years have you been fundraising for?
On and off, honestly, it started when I started my first business. It was a tutoring academy and we expanded into Toronto. And so that was when we first have to raise our capital. Not really raise capital, but, get partners. And then we also sold multiple different franchises, 7 of them in the past few years. And this time around is a legitimate round of really raising capital, because previously it was really about selling franchises and whatnot. But this time we're creating a deck, going to VCs to raise millions of dollars.
And I would even argue that creating a pitch deck is relevant to not just fundraising, but to really selling an idea. And so,
Yeah,
that's important.
What are you guys raising capital for?
We are currently raising capital for a pre-seed/seed round for our loyalty app for gamers.
And to add on to that, I think the reason why we're raising capital for it is because throughout the last decade of doing business, we've seen that, okay, with our own capital, we can actually achieve a lot of things. But now, knowing that there's actually a different business model that you can actually make a much bigger impact through an injection of capital, I think that is really cool.
Who are you looking to raise capital with?
There are many different types of places where you can look for capital, such as friends and family. There are angels, VCs, venture capitalists that has a certain thesis that they want to stick to and invest within that industry. So currently our deck is really primarily focused on fundraising from VCs.
We are currently looking for funding in a pre-seed/seed round, and hopefully we'll be able to find a VC who has aligned interests, which is very important.
The reason why we're focusing more on VCs is because their check sizes are oftentimes much higher. $500 to $1 million is what they, or even more, right? So if we were raising a round of, let's say, $5 million, it's much harder to raise through friends and family and angels, but you would want to make sure that you have VCs, because not only are they going to give you the capital, but then they also have the vast network that you can tap into, resources, strategic partners,
Expertise.
advisories. Yeah, expertise. They open up a lot of doors for you. And that's kind of where you want to make sure that you choose the right VCs, as Cass was saying, that has aligned values, but at the same time, open up the right doors for you.
In your opinion, what is the main purpose of a pitch deck?
I would say a pitch deck is actually a very great tool. It doesn't have to necessarily be for the purpose of fundraising, but it could be for pitching an idea within your team internally. It could be for business development, trying to sell your product or your service. It could be for an influencer trying to pitch their brand to other brands to get their buy-in. So it really allows you to build credibility for what you're doing and getting some support or investment in some way or form through a pitch deck.
I think especially nowadays that we're in this digital age, it's even more important for you to create a pitch deck to convey what is it that you're trying to convey. Whether it's to sell, whether it's to influence, the pitch deck allows you to have the opportunity to do so. And that's really the main purpose.
What would be the one thing you would tell people to focus on the most?
For me, I would say it is being clear on the who this pitch deck is for, because the languaging, the copy, the problem statements, the numbers, they all need to show up for the right person that's receiving the pitch deck or the idea.
I can't agree more with that. It's a learning lesson that I've been really experiencing in the last little while, is that you're going to be talking to hundreds of VCs, and each one of them has a different type of angle or thesis that they have when it's investing. Whether it's like, oh, I really like and believe in B2B software, whereas another VC is very much into Web3 investments. So our product would be able to fundraise from these two different VCs. So the same pitch deck would not apply to both of them. And that's why understanding your demographic and who is it that you're pitching to allows you to create a pitch deck that leans into one narrative stronger and focuses on those points that would appeal to that specific VC even more.
VCs must see hundreds of pitch decks. How do you set yours apart from the competition?
You know what?
What?
This is what, and I wonder if your answer is the same as mine. I would say it is the visuals, the graphics, the design, and the overall look and feel of the pitch deck is what, in a way, indirectly shows your level of execution, your detailedness, your thoughtfulness. And I think this applies to anything you turn over.
I agree with that. And for VCs, when they look at your deck, they want to see all the information there. And are you telling a cohesive story? Do they understand your story just by spending 2-3 minutes scrolling through it and just be like, okay, cool, do I get this or not? Because what they do is they're looking for patterns. And they bucket you already on like, hey, does this pitch deck fall under this bucket, which does not include a solution, or is the solution too complex, or is it missing stuff? Then I would bucket it here. I'm not going to even have a meeting with these guys. Or does this pitch deck has all the relevant information, seems interesting enough to take the meeting? And our goal to send through a pitch deck is honestly to set up a meeting, allowing us to do the pitch. And so telling a cohesive story, adding on the visuals is really the way to go.
In a business partnership, do you find you build a pitch deck from a different perspective?
100%. When I saw this guy's pitch deck, I was like, what?
When I heard your recommendation, I'm like, has she talked to VCs before?
Please elaborate.
So when he is designing or conceptualizing the pitch deck, it comes from a place of how do I tell the story visually, and he knows what he wants to say, but he's trying to convert what his story into visually and walk them through it. I think for me, I go about it in basically slicing it and dicing it in a way to make sure everything lines up to the same structure. So from problem statement to the numbers to being a little bit more cohesive. I don't say more cohesive, but that's my perspective.
So you're saying my stuff is not cohesive?
Yeah.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, what is your perspective then?
Like, doing a deck is all about storytelling.
Once upon a time, there was a lovely princess.
It really is about hitting the emotional marks. It's about hitting all the internal checklists of the VC. The founder, the metric, your solution, the TAM, making sure that, okay, internally, they're like, check, check, check. Okay, these are good to go. Let's move on to the next stage, which is deep diving into what's really going on, looking at your data room, looking at more of the slice and dice that you're referring to. And I think that the pitch deck allows and should be able to tell an exciting enough story that moves to the next stage.
I agree. I think you have components. I think for you, you always like to think about it from how do I capture the person's attention? And that is very important. But also at the same time, it's like there's so many different ways that you can position your product or your service that you're trying to sell. And so lining up the one thing that you want to highlight is key, and making sure everything substantiates it. It's such a humbling experience, because a lot of people tend to, or even I did, or we did, is you stuff in so much information about all the things that you have for features, all the things that you have done before. And so being able to be simple and concise, but then also be able to capture your attention visually, or even with the biggest problem that you're trying to solve for, is important.
I agree. That I agree. I did learn.
I know you did.
When it comes to fundraising, what are some tips for selling yourself and your team to a VC?
It's important to let the VCs know that you are ready, right? And so making sure all the things that they are looking for, you're prepared, and to really understand the VCs that you're pitching to. And I think this is something that is an oversight for a lot of parties, because you're literally pitching to hundreds of VCs, and like each one of them is really difficult for you to deep dive into, like, what have they done? What are the commonalities you guys have? What is it about their fund that you think by them investing into you, it's a value add to their entire portfolio? And so for you to identify these and do the homework for it, so then that way you can help them move their decision factor a little bit easier, shows a lot on your end as the founder. So doing the due diligence and research, I think, is really, really key.
I think also really important is how you show up. So even the deck, being prepared to pitch, but secondly is being prepared to have the questions that they could come up with be in your back pocket. So let's say you have the pitch deck, it's generalized around your idea, but be prepared for them to double click into every area and speak on that, and have the supporting information, documents, articles, be able to speak to anything that they could curveball and ask you. So be prepared. Full stop.
How do you deal with rejection from a VC?
Cry.
Talk to Cass.
You know what? Understanding what is it that they were looking for. Like, what is it that was missing? Having said that, as much as we're listening, I would take that as a grain of salt, because you also don't want to be always tweaking your product and your service so that it could fit what you didn't get. Because every VC, as you kind of mentioned before, is looking for something else. But if you keep amalgamating and keep changing your product and service or your pitch to fit that one VC, I think what's important here is to be able to stay connected to and have faith in what you're really trying to go for.
Man, so much truth to that, but at the same time, it is so difficult to execute when you're in it, right? And I agree with you hands down, because that's really the way to go. Yet when you're the one that is getting the rejection, you can't help but to think that, oh, what they're suggesting or what their rebuttal is how do you distinguish the noise versus the signal is really the key. Is like, is this constructive feedback, and is this a rebuttal that you feel like, okay, cool, I actually do need to make a structural change to our product to answer to the reason of no.
So how I would argue that would be, if it's a consistent theme through multiple VCs, at some point you got to listen. But if it's one or two VCs saying, I could, do this, or this is what I'm looking for, and then you go and, push in a feature to fit that, then that doesn't do you service.
Yeah, agreed. And it's like just being able to not take it personally, know very objectively where you stand, and to know the reason why they say no. Because a lot of times when VC says no, it's not about you, it's really about them.
What a great life lesson. I would say, even if you lose some, they're just reps, right? You're going to have to go through a lot of reps.
It's so sad. It's so hard to eat shit all the time.
Keep eating it. You'll get there.
Thanks, Cass.
What was the most valuable feedback you've ever gotten from a VC?
To Cass's point, you don't have to satisfy everyone. You choose your lane, you go into it, you trust what you're building, and think big, and just trust your intuition and just keep going at it.
Oh my god. Yes. Does that mean I'll stop hearing like, oh, we need to change it?
No. We do need to change it. We do need to add stuff.
You're just going back on what you're saying.
What I meant is we've got to make it better before we go out in the marketplace.
So I think one of my biggest learning through this investment journey is understanding, why do we need the fundraising? Like, is it something that we need right now, or do we have runway, and do we have plans to be able to extend that runway? And if we do, I think the value that we could get could be huge for when we actually do a round of funding. So instead of funding now at a smaller amount, our valuation could be higher because we've done more. We've been able to show more traction. We've been able to, let's say, have a signed letter of intent. Let's say we brought on board a very pronounced advisor, and that will then all together paint a better picture and allow us to go fundraise at a higher level than what we would have been able to do before.
I mean, I get it. I agree with it. It's just harder to execute, to do.
It is.
When you're
It's your own money.
It's your own money. You're forking out tens and thousands of dollars every single month, building something that is high risk to find the product market fit. And the moment that you run out of cash, then it's like, oh, you fold the table and there's nothing more. So that's why it's like, I get it. At the same time, you got to be able to live long enough and be in the game and not fold.
It's always a constant conversation with us because you're the one who's looking for money. I'm the one always spending it. And so I'm like, okay, can we push it later? Because I really do believe in our product. And, looking back at how much runway can we have, what are our plans, and then seeing, okay, let's keep going so that we could build this into a bigger, better thing.
If you were to give one piece of advice to someone making a pitch deck and starting their fundraising process, what would it be?
This is always a kind of like what I mentioned. It's always a little bit of a humbling experience to keep things simple, clear, and concise. The more simple and clear to communicate what you're building and highlight the most important things to the right target audience is, I would say, is the most key. Being able to pull out the noise is hard because you want to put in all the crazy and cool ideas that you have on your pitch deck. But sometimes you have to let yourself be able to speak to it.
Agree. And to add on to that, I think it's just don't overthink it at all. You just got to put in the reps. You just got to go get the meetings. You just got to practice. Go through 100 pitches. You'll know what works, what doesn't work, what you should take out. And a lot of people I see is just they're stuck in this loop of constant iterations of months and not going to the market and missing the entire narrative and the entire momentum, all because they think that the deck is not good enough, right? So don't let that be the handicap in your journey.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.